Cześć, z tej strony Michał Iwanicki. Chciałem Was zaprosić na mój wywiad z moim nauczycielem medycyny chińskiej, Donaldem Halfkennym, specjalistą właśnie medycyny chińskiej ze Stanów Zjednoczonych, który praktykuje i uczy w Niemczech oraz w Polsce. Temat tego wywiadu to towarzyszenie osobom terminalnie chorym. Zapraszam do oglądania.
Hello again. After 2 years, my name is, for those who don't know, my name is Michał Iwanicki. I'm a Chinese medicine specialist, osteopath, physiotherapist, founder of this here channel that in English is called The Middle Way, and in Polish it's called Droga Środka. And with me here today for the second time is Donald Halfkennym, Chinese medicine specialist from United States, working in Germany. You can read more about him in the bio. And I invited you here. Hello, Don.
Hello, Michał.
To talk about very, I think, important topic. And the topic is accompanying people terminally ill. The first question for you is, what does accompanying terminally ill mean for you?
All right, that's well, actually, there's two different meanings for me. Not for me personally, but in terms of when I'm teaching and when I'm working with colleagues, Western medical doctors, Chinese medical doctors, or practitioners. One is understanding the personal implications when you're accompanying someone who's dying, and being clear about what that means for you and what that does to you. And the other is the clinical aspect. We have the tendency in the West to separate our feelings and our emotional connection with the patient when they're seriously ill, and to deal with them from a distance, to remove ourselves from the emotional involvement. It's a form of self-protection.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't understand, even though that may be valid, I'm saying may be valid in terms of Western medicine, it is not valid in terms of classical Chinese medicine. So for me, one of the things that is very important when I think about my accompanying someone who is terminally ill or is in the process of dying, because terminally ill and dying are two different phases. Some can be terminally ill and live for 5 years. Dying is something that you usually talk about when someone is in the process of, their body's in the process of giving up for the last 5 months or 4 months. So what's important for me is to help the clinicians to understand that there is an emotional roller coaster that the patient will be going through, but they also will be going through in that process. Our tendency in the West is to step back and to not admit that's happening, to not let that get too close.
Yeah.
Which means that we're cutting ourselves off from our own heart, from our own spirit, from our own shen in dealing with the patient. And that denies the fact that it's exactly that aspect that is central to the classical medicine, classical Chinese medicine. It's the role of the heart for the practitioner as well as for the patient. So if you shut that off, then the way in which you're dealing with them from a Chinese or from an Eastern point of view is more mechanical in nature. It doesn't mean it doesn't work, but it means it's not complete.
From my perspective, is the problem is that nobody speaks about the death. I mean, I can tell in Poland, my parents, in the media, you know, people are not speaking about it. They don't know how to approach it.
No, death is a taboo.
Yeah.
It's scary for people in the West. I mean, in the older cultures, also in the West, in the 1900s, in the 1800s, people had a different relationship to death in the pre-industrial period because they saw it as a natural part of nature. They saw it as a natural part of their life. People died at home mostly. Some died in the hospital, some died in war, but it was something that was to be expected after a certain point in time, unless there was an accident or someone was beating up or robbed or killed in war. It was something that would happen after a certain period of their life. Just like in nature, things die after a certain period. Animals die after a certain period. So people had a different relationship to that. It didn't mean that they liked it. It didn't mean that they weren't afraid of it, but they accepted it as a normal part of their life.
That's right.
In the Western world in particular, but also increasingly in the Eastern world now, in the world outside of Europe, outside of the United States, mainly because of the influence of technology and industrialization, dying is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Just like being sick is not acceptable. You must have done something wrong. We still have this aspect from the period of the Reformation where people think that sickness is a curse or the result of a punishment for bad deeds done during their life. God's punishing them. And you can hear people sometimes say, why is God doing this to me? Or why is God doing this to my husband, to my wife, to my children? Why are they dying? Why did God take them from me? Which is a denial of the fact that we are part of a process universally, not just in terms of our family, where there's a normal cycle between birth and death. And death is only a process that goes into another phase. Classical Chinese medicine has a very strong spiritual base. I'm not talking about the religious aspects, but a very strong spiritual base. And most religions had that in the beginning. They understood that death was something that didn't just involve the individual who died, but involved their family, involved their community, and was normal.
That's right.
Now it's not normal. We have the medicine that can help people, live longer. We have instruments that can help people to live longer. We do everything possible to prevent them from dying when we're treating them. One of the things you will hear sometimes in a hospital is how grateful the people are that are working there that the patient chose to die when they were not working, in between shifts.
That's right.
That's insane. That's perverse.
But
that's where we've ended up. We have got to a point where we instrumentalize, where we materialize life to such an extent that it has to function just like a car. It has to function, and if something's wrong, we repair it, and it should be able to function until it falls apart on its own.
That's right.
All right, but we don't consider that death. We consider that erosion or things are just falling apart. So we have distanced ourselves from that.
Because we are thinking about our bodies that they are like a machine, as you said, that they are like cars, and they are not. Because there is, soul, for example, and so much other stuff going on.
No, we're more than this. We're more than this flesh and blood. And I don't just mean in terms of our intellect or our mind or emotions. I mean that there is what in Eastern thought or non-European thought concept of a spiritual entity, and that we are the physical manifestation.
That's right.
Of our soul. It's not that that's part of us. That is us. So it manifests itself physically. So when the time comes when this body no longer serves its purpose, then it's like taking off a shirt or a coat and moving on. But those are things that are hard for people to accept growing up in a culture that denies that reality. So
Yeah.
that's one aspect. The other thing that is we've become very egoistic. There was a period until I would say the beginning of the 20th century, middle of the 20th century, where people knew that they were part of a greater community. They knew that, just like in the book No Man is an Island, they knew that alone they could not survive, that they were part of something bigger. And that process of birth and death was also involved in that. It affected that community as well. People, when somebody died, the body of the person who had died was at home, and people came and they paid respects and they brought food and they supported the family. There was a mourning, and they didn't put pressure on them that they had to show up the next day at work. And if they had a farm, if they had a farm, they would help doing the work in the fields until people were far enough in their mourning process where they could begin to participate in the community.
That's right.
Again, that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
That's not the case anymore. So all of the things that had helped us in the past to see death as a natural process are things that we no longer have a relationship to.
Yeah, I agree. What brought you on this path? Because you started as a Chinese medicine specialist, and you probably, like me, dealt with patients that had some sickness, but they are not going to die. I mean, in the near future, as far as we know.
We never know.
Yeah. And there was a switch, right? At some point, maybe some patients came to your practice, or you did something to, switch to other patients.
Well, no, actually, it's a little bit different. I come from a large family, and my family has African American as well as indigenous roots. So our relationship, in terms of the traditional Afro American and indigenous concept of death, is a little bit different. My grandparents died at home. I had cousins that died when they were very young because of accidents or sickness. So growing up, even though it was painful, that was a normal part of our life. That was a normal part of my life. When I started practicing medicine, there wasn't a difference to me. In the beginning, I did not have patients that were terminally ill because that was in the early 70s, and Chinese medicine, classical acupuncture was not so accepted that people, if they were seriously ill, would come to us. They come with pain, they came with digestive problems, they came with, the wish to become pregnant or those kinds of things. They couldn't sleep. But it wasn't until 1974 where the hospice movement in the United States became very active.
What movement?
Hospice.
Okay.
That movement became very active, and I was approached by a student of mine whose father was dying. He was in a coma, actually. If I thought, well, actually, they approached my teacher, Dr. So, if he thought it was possible to treat him, even though he was in a coma, because his lungs were filling up with fluid.
Yeah.
And the removal of the fluid, you could see that it was painful and discomforting to him, even though he was still in a coma, because of the way in which his body reacted.
Yeah.
So my teacher didn't want to have anything to do with that because of some of the legal consequences at that time. But, I said, well, I was willing to do that. I was willing to take the chance. I was an American citizen who wasn't. So the fear of being deported if something happened was something he had to deal with, which I understood. It wasn't a problem. And I treated this patient. And in the coma, his lungs got better. The amount of fluid was less, and he came out of the coma. He died shortly afterwards, but I could see a different aspect of classical acupuncture and Chinese medicine that I had experienced before. And based on the treatment of this patient, the people in the hospice movement in Boston asked me to work with them.
Mm.
We had problems because at that point, the concepts of hospice were, there were two things that were, there still is, there's two things that were very central to the hospice movement. One is that people should not die alone, and the other is that they shouldn't die in pain. They shouldn't be in pain. But what that meant was that oftentimes they were, because of the medication they were taking for the pain, that they weren't clear in their head.
Yeah.
Because of the work that I've been doing in the drug community, to the drug detox with classical acupuncture, I knew that it was possible for people who were in pain to be treated without becoming foggy in their head, without their mind becoming clouded, to reduce the pain medication, that the pain medication would be more effective with the treatment of acupuncture and they could use less. And all of a sudden it was like, this was a gift. This was something that I could bring into the work with dying patients that would allow them to live clearly until they died.
Yeah. I don't know how it is in Germany, but I just recently had a patient. She is a cancer patient.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, the thing is developing. And, in Poland, the patients are just left alone. I mean, physicians are only giving pain medicine and they are telling them not to move.
Right.
Because you are doing, the circulation is going up. You cannot do any massage. You cannot do any manual therapy, any osteopathy, any acupuncture.
Mm-hmm.
It's madness,
Yeah, it is. But that's what they do it in the United States as well, not for everybody, but at the end stages, they call it comfort.
Yeah.
Which means that all they're doing, they put somebody in a bed, in a room, and they pump them full of morphine, and that's it until the relatives say, well, you can turn the machines off.
Yeah.
Yeah, which means that the last days, weeks, months, however long it takes, this patient who exists in their head, who is still alive inside, has difficult communicating, cannot take leave of the people that they love, cannot express their own wishes, has lost control of their life to a certain extent, that other people are determining what happens to them, when it happens, and how it happens. And they are basically prisoners, not in their disease, not in the dying process, but in the medical treatment that they are getting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the values of, at least in my experience, of classical acupuncture is that, we tell the patients, we cannot prevent you from dying.
Mm-hmm.
I had a young man who was 45 years old, had lung cancer and metastasis through his whole body, never smoked, never drank, lived super, super, super healthy, had a bio farm in Suturo, so there was no air pollution or anything else. And they discovered his cancer by accident, and they told me he had 3 months to live at the most.
Mm-hmm.
So he ran around to everybody, including going to Tibet, trying to find someone who would help him.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't find anybody. There was a doctor who was the attending physician of the Dalai Lama. And I had known him. We had met a couple of times. And he sent this patient to me. And the patient came in with his wife, and they said, you're our last hope.
Mm-hmm.
But kids, he said, you can help me. I'm dying. I don't want to die. I have two small children. They're 4 and 3 or something, 4 and 2 years old. And I told him, I don't think that's what he meant, because I cannot keep you from dying. I can accompany you. I can help, to the best of my ability, that your condition is something that is acceptable to you in the terms that you are able to experience and live your life with your family until it's time that you die.
Yeah.
But I cannot prevent the dying from happening. And they were very upset and they left. A week later, they came back, and he said to me, you're the only person that said that to me.
Yeah, I think it's very honest, because right now, and not only right now, I think it's forever, that people made business from it to
That's
give this hope to the people. And sometimes, there was a miracle or something. There was this spark that was needed, but in many cases, no.
Well, the thing is, we don't. If somebody says you're going to die tomorrow,
Yeah,
they don't know that.
yeah,
This patient lived, by the way, a year longer.
mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Part of the first thing, and I can't take credit for that because I don't, I'm not God.
Yeah.
But one of the most important things in the beginning was reminding him, you're alive. Right now, you're alive. And what I can do is I can help you to experience that and to live that and to enjoy the time that you have differently. Or, and it's your choice, you can die, meaning you will die every day 1,000 times because somebody told you you will die.
This brings me to another question connected to this. What people that are terminally ill really need in terms of, emotions from the family, the caring,
Well, we have to separate. I have to be careful.
Okay.
If someone is not trained as a family therapist, a psychologist, psychiatrist, or even a social worker, I would strongly recommend that they don't try to be that for that patient.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. What's important, what my experience has been, is they have to know that you see them as they are, that you really see them. You see the person there, not the disease, not the dying process, but the person. That you are there and you are bearing witness to their life. Because many people who end up in that situation don't have any family anymore.
Yeah.
And they don't have anyone who bears witness to their life in these last periods, this last phase of their life. So they die anonymously.
Yeah.
So being present and that they know that you see them, that you hear them, that you listen to them, that you set priorities with them, not for them, in terms of the treatment, is extremely important. Even if they have the same, they have back problems. So you know how you treat with back problems if the person's not dying. Okay. And some of the things that you can do with back problems for people who are not dying, you can also do for people who are dying, but you have to remember your treatment process is not necessary to cure the problem because you don't know if you have that much time. What's important is to support the patient in their wishes to the best of your ability for the period that you have. Now, that means that you have to check in regularly. You have to, what I would do is I make a contract with the patient at the beginning, a verbal contract. This is what I cannot do. I cannot prevent you from dying. And I need you to understand that and accept that. And that's very painful, because they come to us normally after going through the Western medical or other medical traditions as the last hope. We don't see people in the beginning of that process. We see them in the middle or at the end of that process, usually, because they've tried everything else. So that sometimes is takes 2 or 3 treatment sessions, 2 or 3 meetings, where I am treating them still, but the central piece is being very clear: you're alive. You know, you have less time than I do in terms of your life. But I could walk out the door and get hit by a car. My wife almost died 12 years ago being hit by a car. So you're not too young to die. And it's not necessarily because of a disease. But even if the disease that you have is one that basically is deadly and leads to a premature, whatever that means, death, you are still at the moment capable of doing things like talking, reading, writing, making recordings, watching movies, enjoying music. Those are things that are possible. And the question is it really your choice or not? And the answer is yeah. It is. If you live the day as if it's your first, with the same fascination that children have, and understand that it may be your last, which means that you don't waste the time on things that are frivolous, then your day is full. Right? And you can, in terms of time that you have, you can experience it with your loved ones, with your colleagues, very differently, possibly, than what you've done up until that point in time. People set their priorities differently when they understand that their time is limited. Even if they don't know what the limit is. They become aware that there are some things that are extremely important that they haven't dealt with. There's issues that haven't been resolved. There's discussions with parents or with brothers and sisters or with their husband or wife that they should have had because of misunderstandings or arguments or whatever that they haven't had. But in that period where they are then in a more peaceful place, that can happen. Oh, my dog is doing something strange. Hold on for a second. All right. We don't make that happen. But we try to stay sensitive to the fact that the trust that is built in the treatment process enables them to begin talking about some things that they may have not have talked to anyone else about before.
If you can tell me, how does your work? Yeah, I mean, there are many patients, there are many conditions, but how does your work look like with those terminal patients?
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things. One is just the straight Chinese medical aspect, where you do an examination, you talk to the patient, you hear what the story is, you get a sense of what the medical history is about, you get a sense of how aggressive that disease process, the pathological process is. And then you sit down with them and say, well, let's look at, this is what exists. Where are your priorities in that? What is the thing that causes you the most discomfort or the most problem, physically as well as at other levels? Because in Chinese medicine, we know that those are also signs of possible dysfunction for certain systems or certain organs in the body. For example, if the fear is extremely great, if the person becomes angry in situations where they usually wouldn't. But we also have to, I also explain to them that there are stages that you will go through. You will go through the anger, you go through the despair, you'll go through the frustration, you will go through trying to make a deal with God. And then you go to a place where you haven't accepted it yet, but you surrender. Well, I can't do anything. And then it happens all over again. And then at some point you arrive at a place where you accept that this process is not reversible. I mean, it can be reversed based on other things, but I am not capable of it. And normally the patient isn't either, otherwise they would have done it. So that's actually the first couple of treatments are dealing with some of the physical and to some extent emotional issues that come up in terms of treating them. But it's also being very clear about what the parameters are of this accompanying process of, what it looks like. There's also a technique, it's called Tong Shen Ming or Ping Shen, that I use, not only in terms of the regular practice, but very intensively with the patient, that helps them being in an atmosphere of calm. It's not a meditation, but it's even though some patients want that, if they do, then I will help them with different meditation techniques. But it's something that helps put them in a place where they can accept themselves differently than they have been up to that point in time. They experience themselves differently. And I alternate that being the center of a treatment, of the visit, or the classical acupuncture aspect being the center of the treatment. Sometimes it means I've used 3-4 needles, and the rest of it is Ping Shen or Tong Shen Ming, or maybe there's a little bit of massage involved. But you know, that's the stuff. That's what it's about. You know, it's the president of the hospice movement, Associated United, said, you know, one thing, he said, you know, we have basically two goals. One is that people don't die alone, and the other is that they don't die in pain. Their method of not dying in pain, though, is different from what we're capable of doing. And based on that, we can offer our patients, the people who come to us, the possibility that they are clearer in these last days. You know, they can communicate differently in these last days, that they can experience their grandchildren coming to see them, for example. Now that's very important. I remember when my grandfather was dying, my mother's father, you know, he was someone that had a very strong, even though he's a lay preacher, his effect on the people around him, he's a very spiritual person, put it that way. And people would come just to sit with him, just to be near him, not to talk about anything, just to be in his presence. You know, and as he was dying, the same thing happened. People came and they would sit and they would talk about what the issues or problems. The man is lying in bed dying. You know, and in the beginning, I was like, don't you have any respect for him? And you know, he was saying, it's all right. You know, it's why I'm here. It's what I can do. You know, they get solace just by being here and knowing that someone is bearing witness to their life. And in doing that, they are bearing witness to mine as well. You know, and he died peacefully. He died in bed. He went to sleep and didn't wake up. You know, I've had my father did the same. He went to sleep, you know, and he didn't wake up. He died within 6 months of his diagnosis.
I have to tell you that I use Ping Shen techniques from the time that we met first, many years ago. And I do it with patients, with terminal ill patients, of course, also. And they are, you know, so relaxed afterwards in their minds that I really appreciate it. And this brings me to another topic, which is the course. The course that you are providing, I am organizing on March and May of 2026 here in Wrocław. I think it's the first course of this kind here in Poland. The topic for me is the deepest one that there is, you know. If you can tell more about this course, I mean, there are 2 weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and what the course consists of, what people can learn from it.
Well, one of the things they can learn from it, first of all, is to understand what their own concept of death is. Because if you don't really have a sense of what that is, of what that means to you, not just the fear, but all of the things around that, then you cannot be present with your patient.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that's important to understand is that your belief system is not your patient's.
Mm.
And you have no right to impose that on your patients. You have to be able to hear their concern about dying, hear their wish to be accompanied by some other religious or spiritual instance during that process, and to be able to support that without feeling, threatened by it. Be able to accept that as that's what's there, because you're there for them. You're not there for you.
Yeah.
This is not a missionary process that we're involved in. Which means that we will look at our own ideas about our death. How would you react if someone told you today you have 5 days to live?
Yeah.
What happens inside of you? How do you deal with that? How do you, does it change the way in which you look at your children, partner, parents, coworkers? And we'll go through that, and we'll go through how that changes, how you're able to accept that differently based on, among other things, the Tong Shen Ming or Ping Shen technique. After going through that, when we do those exercises, when we look at again, what's the difference in terms of how you feel?
Mm.
What's the difference in terms of how you experience the person next to you? How do you communicate your issues about your dying to the other participants in the course? Right? Because that's what has to happen when you're with a patient. They will ask you sometimes, if the trust level is high enough, they will begin to not only question their view, but they want to know yours. But it has to come from them, not from you. Right? So you have to be able to build the atmosphere where that trust and where that communication is possible. There are then specific techniques. There are a number of acupuncture points that have the effect of working at a number of different levels, heaven, earth, and mankind in the body, and connecting all the various forms and systems that make up classical acupuncture. Right? And they're central in terms of treatment in general, but they're more important in terms of treatment when somebody's going through a process of being terminally ill.
Yeah.
So the combination of that and being in your own heart during that process is something that we will practice, we will talk about, we'll work with each other on that, and the people who participate have to be willing to treat as well as be treated by the other participants. Otherwise, what they're learning are mechanical techniques with some theory, which you can put in your notebook and put on your bookshelf, and when you need it, probably will only be able to maybe use a third or fifth or quarter of what their course is about. But if you've experienced it, then you can not only communicate that differently to your patient, it helps you to deepen and improve your own clinical practice.
Yeah.
So that's what we'll be doing in the course. After the first weekend, which is very short, 3 days is a small amount of time. There are 2 months in between where people, I hope, will practice the techniques that they learned on the weekend, and maybe have the opportunity, maybe have the luck to be able to work with some patients who are in that process. And we'll come back and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the patients. We'll talk about how to improve the techniques. We'll talk about where the problems turned up to be, what issues that they had in terms of treatment, what was difficult, what are the things that they thought they understood, but it turns out that they didn't. To sort of round that out in the second weekend. That's what it's about. That's what the course is about. It's a beginning. Learning to work with people who are terminally ill is a beginning. And it's something that will accompany them their whole life. Understanding that if the person who is terminally ill is your wife or your husband, then who you are is a wife or husband, not a clinician.
Yeah.
If it's your parents, then you're a child.
Yeah.
And being able to accept that, being able to accept the powerlessness that you feel when you think, well, I should be able to help them, and the guilt that surrounds that, and understanding that's all natural, but it's not helpful. It's not helpful for you, and it's not helpful for them. So, I mean, it's a lot. It will be a very intense weekend. There will be lots of questions that people have based in their own religious and spiritual experiences and belief, their own personal experiences in terms of losing loved ones or people that are close to them. And I will try to deal with that as honestly and as thoroughly as possible, so people are able to incorporate that into their lives in a different manner.
Mm-hmm.
But that's an ongoing process. It's not something that, you take a course and it's finished.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is understanding that if you accept a patient who's in that process, you have to be aware of your own limitations. Are you capable of seeing the person beginning, for example, 2 times a week or 1 time a week, and then when things get more serious, twice a week, and if they get more serious, 3 times a week? Is the patient in a situation where they can afford that? And if they can't, how do you deal with that? Do you start the process, and then when the money runs out, so I'm sorry, that was it, it's over? Are you available 2:00 in the morning? If the husband or wife calls up and says he can't breathe, or what's your first response? Call the ambulance. All right, you can do that. It's legitimate, right? You can also be there, but those things you have to decide, and you have to clearly communicate that with your patient as well.
What is really, I think, important also for the students is that we have, small group of people, a small group of specialized people. So all the participants will be specialized in Chinese medicine, because this is a master course.
Right.
And we will not talk about the basic stuff. We will get straight into,
We get into business.
into the business. That's right.
Yeah, that's important. It's also important for people to understand that the course in itself, it's really a beginning. It's really a first step. And it's not about them proving to me that they know Chinese medicine. It's about them learning an approach based on, we can spend the time doing that. I've had courses where a third of the course where people trying to convince me that they knew a lot and understood a lot, and all they really wanted were point combinations. Doesn't interest me. They will get, they will learn how to put together effective but simple treatment protocols in terms of dealing with patients from a couple of issues. What I was considering is MS, cancer, I'm not sure which one, and maybe ILS as disease forms. But it depends on the group. It depends on how advanced they are. It depends on their own clinical experience. Because me, I'll prepare all of that. Maybe I'll do a fourth of it, depending on the group. So
this is I think problem of many Chinese medicine courses that I took part in, that people don't understand what they are doing, and nobody gives them information. They just give them some dogmas, and some of the dogmas are not even from the books. They are just from the practice, and the practice is like 10 years and there is no experience. So
yeah, but that's normal. People are like that. You can only teach what you know. Right. And if you understand, Dr. So was very clear about that. He continued to tell me, you have to read the old books. You have to read the old books. You have to read the old books. What he meant was the classics. And you have to also understand that in the East, outside of Europe, outside of the West, things that were written down was not the truth. It was part of it. You know, it was experience or a way of orienting yourself. It was like a roadmap. But going on that road and dealing with the problems that came up, you needed to have someone who was alive who had been there already to be able to explain that, to talk to you about that, to tell you what the differences are in terms of interpretations and where you can look that stuff up. You know, if you rely totally and completely only on the word from the people who have taught you, that works until you understand the foundations. But after that, it's not enough. You know, it's not enough. And, you know, I came to Dr. So after having two other teachers who were Chinese professors who came to the United States, who said to me, he says, you know, we can't teach anything more. You need to go to this person. And that wasn't an admission of failure. That was a gift. You know, it's like, we see that you really want to know. And this is where you go to find that out. This is where you go so someone can help you on that path that it looks like that you really want to travel on. You know, and that's what I try to do with my students. You know, I try to help them on the path if they're really interested. If they're only interested in combinations, I can give them that. I can refer them to the books where the formulas are in and wish them good luck. But that's not what it's about.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Don, for the
You're welcome.
interview.
You're welcome. I hope to be able to see you in March.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too, because you know this course is also very important for me, not only as an organizer but also as a student, as always.
Yep.
So I invite all the people watching this video to this course. The website that you can search all the information is called pingshen.pl. You have courses of Don. There's also, of course, contact information, the email, and also contact information of Don, of his website. So,
Excellent.
Don, thank you again.
Michal, I thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about this, because this is something has been very important to me over the years. You know, as a clinician, as a person, as a family member, and to be able to share some of that experience as well as the techniques, you know, with other people, so they can avoid some of the pitfalls that you inevitably, you know, fall into in your practice life. For me is a great honor. So I thank you for the interview, and I also thank you for the work that you've done over the years.
Thanks.
It's good seeing you.
You too.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.